Thank you. Good morning to everyone. Special Sabbath coming up. Sabbath is, first of all, Yud Shvat, the 75th yard site of the Frierdiker Rebbe, as well as the 75th anniversary of the beginning of the leadership of our Rebbe. 75 years in which the world was changed in an incredible, positive way, in an unrecognizable way. Look at what Yiddishkeit looked like, what the prognosis was 75 years ago. And people were just hoping that something would be left of Yiddishkeit. And the Rebbe turned it around in a way that Yiddishkeit is flourishing and blossoming across the globe in an ever-increasing way. Made the teachings of Chassidus available to all people in all languages. Inspired Yidden to have enthusiasm and a proud excitement to Yiddishkeit. And it's ongoing in a very, very increasing and powerful manner. As we see all over the world, the work of the Rebbe continuously increasing and getting stronger and stronger. This Shabbos is also Shabbos Shira. It's Parshas Mishalach. We read about the crossing of the Red Sea, the crossing of the Yam Suf, and consequently the song of Oz Yashir. And Shabbos Shira is very special Shabbos. It's especially special for women, as we find it by Kriyas Yam Suf. Although the men sang Shira and then the women sang, but the women sang with more enthusiasm. And the women that say they went with supim with dances and with tambourines. And Chazal say, how did the women have tambourines by the cross the Yam Suf? Because the tzidkoniyos Shabbat there, the righteous women of that generation, were absolutely confident that the Almighty is going to make miracles for them. And they took out tambourines with them from Egypt in order to celebrate and to give thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu when he performs those miracles. And it says that's the reason why the Haftarah of this Shabbos is Shiras Devaira, Song of Devaira, although there are many songs of men in Tanakh, like Shiras David, which we read on Shvi Shal Pesach. Nevertheless, the Haftarah of this Shabbos is Shiras Devaira, because as a woman, the women had a greater excitement and enthusiasm and praised Hashem with greater vigor, even than the men did, and we see this in the Shira this week. This Shabbos Shira, 83 years ago, was the Histalkus, the passing of the Rebbetzin Stern Asara, Frierdiker Rebbe's mother, the Rebbetzin of the Rebbe Rashab, passed away in Yud Gimel Shvat. That year was Yud Gimel Shvat, and it was Shabbos Shira. And although she was elderly and weak, she was very particular about her shiurim of davening and learning. And she was at a stage where I'm not sure if she was able to get out of bed, but she asked for her siddur on Shabbos morning, and she said, "Heint is Shabbos Shira, heint darf man gar anders davenen. Today is Shabbos Shira. Today one has to daven in a very special way." She began to daven, and when she reached Nishmas, her soul ascended on high. So that's a reminder that Shabbos Shira is not an ordinary Shabbos, even when it doesn't fall on Yud Shvat. How much more so when it falls on Yud Shvat, and a special Yud Shvat, like this year, 75 years. Rebbetzin Stern Asara was the wife of the Rebbe Rashab. She outlived the Rebbe Rashab by 22 years. The Rebbe Rashab passed away in Tafresh Pei, 1920, and she passed away in Tafshin Beis, 1942. She was with the Frierdiker Rebbe through the bombardment of Warsaw, and later escaped with him to Riga, from Riga to Stockholm, where he finally came to America. And she lived the first 2 years in 770. She had a room in the Frierdiker Rebbe's apartment. It's called the Alter Rebbetzins Zimmer. That's where she passed away. Frierdiker Rebbe, at the time of her passing, was in Chicago. There's a famous Bikur Chicago. She was in 770 in New York. Frierdiker Rebbe then was on a journey to Chicago. Is when the Frierdiker Rebbe was in America the first time around in 1929, 1930. He traveled around many communities across the United States, including Chicago. And in Chicago, he struck a very strong chord. People in Chicago were very taken by the Frierdiker Rebbe. And when the Frierdiker Rebbe finally emigrated to America in 1940, the community in Chicago began pleading with the Frierdiker Rebbe that he should make a journey to Chicago and again inspire the community there. And originally it wasn't possible. The Frierdiker Rebbe's health didn't permit it. Looking to organize it in a way that would be suitable. And eventually in 1942, in the winter of 1942, it was organized. And on the 7th of Shvat, today's the 7th of Shvat, Frierdiker Rebbe made the journey to Chicago by train. And while in Chicago, he said various mamorim and received people for Yechidus. And then that Shabbos, which was Yud Gimel Shvat, 13th of Shvat, Shabbos Shira. So it was a very special Shabbos in Chicago. But Motzei Shabbos, the news came that Frierdiker Rebbe's mother had passed away. Therefore, his trip had to be cut short. He had to go back to New York for the Levaya. So what was originally meant to be a 2-week stay in Chicago with a very special program planned out was cut short, and a lot of that program did not materialize. The Oyhel, the area, the Beis HaChaim where the Oyhel is, was purchased then when the Rebbe Steiner Sarah passed away. So that chelka was purchased, and I actually only heard this week that the procedure to be mekadesh the Beis HaKvaris, if you look at the structure of the chelka where the oil is, you'll see that the center of the chelka is the burial place of the Rebbe Steiner Sarah. Everything else is built around her. So the oil is opposite to Rebbe Steiner Sarah's kever, and the whole structure of the whole setup is built around. She's in the center, and everything is built around her. That chelka was purchased when she passed away for her burial. So I just heard this week that when you set up a new Beis HaKvaris, you make the special procedure of being mekadesh the Beis HaKvaris. So the Bachrim from 770, a small group of Bachrim there, Bachrim from 770 were called upon to come to be mekadesh the Beis HaKvaris, and my father, Olav Shalom, was one of the Bachrim there. So he was part of that procedure of being mekadesh the Beis HaKvaris where the oil is. There's a procedure. You go, you make hakafas, you say certain tilim. Anyway, so as I started, it's Parshas B'Shalach, and we usually start off with something from the Sedra. So I'll share something from the Sedra, which I think is quite powerful. It says right after the Shira, right after the song that the Jewish people sang, the song of praise and thanks after crossing the Yam Suf, crossing the Red Sea. So it says that Vayasa Moshe Yisrael Yam Suf, that Moshe encouraged the Yidden to journey from the Yam Suf. They didn't want to go. Moshe Rabbeinu had to give them a little push to leave the Yam Suf. Why did Moshe Rabbeinu have to push them to leave the Yam Suf? Why were they so excited about staying by the Yam Suf? So our sages tell us that when the Egyptians were drowned in the Yam Suf, together with their horses and their chariots, and everything was washed up at the shore of the Yam Suf. Now the Egyptians decorated their chariots and their horses with gold and silver. So there was a tremendous amount of gold and silver that was washed up on the shore of the Yam Suf. So Yidden were standing by the shores of the Yam Suf collecting that gold and silver. When it came time to leave and move towards Matan Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu told the Yidden it's time to go, and he had a hard time convincing them because they were busy collecting the gold and silver of the Yam Suf. And it says that Bizas Hayam, the spoils of the Yam Suf, were greater than the spoils of Egypt. So in Egypt, it says that they left with an amazing amount of wealth. There wasn't a single Jew that had less than 90 donkeys laden with the gold and silver of Egypt. So, and the wealth of the Yam Suf was even more. So they were quite busy collecting the gold and silver from the spoils of the Yam Suf. Therefore, when it was time to go, they weren't so eager to go. They were actually wanted to stay and finish the job. So the question is, the crossing of the Yam Suf wasn't just an act of sparing the Yidden, sparing their lives, which it did achieve, but it was also a tremendous revelation of godliness. As our sages tell us, that an ordinary maidservant saw the revelation of godliness by the Red Sea in a more incredible way than the greatest prophets saw a revelation of godliness. So if the Jewish people were so uplifted to such a high, and at the point they said, Zekeli Vehu, so they were very inspired and very uplifted and very spiritually involved. So how is it that after that they had nothing else to do other than collect gold and silver? Surely they were uplifted to a level where they appreciated going to Matan Torah more than they appreciated gold and silver. So they should have been, instead of crouching over the shores of the Yam Suf collecting gold and silver, you would expect them to be itching to go to Mount Sinai and receive the Torah. In general, one can ask, what do they want to do with all that gold and silver? They were on their way into the desert. And in the desert, there wasn't much you could do with gold and silver. So what were they so passionate about collecting gold and silver for if they were on their way into the desert and there wasn't much use for it over there? And if you want to say that we know that there were certain peddlers that passed through the desert and sold certain trinkets, certain things that maybe the Yidden could have bought from them. But as we mentioned before, every Yid had already 90 donkeys laden with gold and silver. What do you need more for? And if you want to tell me that the Yidden were expecting to go straight from Matan Torah into Eretz Yisrael, because we know that they would not have sinned, they would have gone directly from Har Sinai to Eretz Yisrael. And over there, it would have been a final redemption, as we mentioned in a previous year. So if that's the case, maybe that's why they needed the gold and silver, because they didn't think they're staying in the desert. They thought they're going straight into a civilized land. But imagine if we're talking about the final redemption and preparing for the final redemption, surely they had other things to worry about more than gold and silver. Somebody told you that Mashiach is coming in 5 minutes, definitely. How would you spend the next 5 minutes collecting gold and silver? You surely have more important things to do. So if they thought they were staying in the desert, there's no purpose in the gold and silver. If they thought they're going straight to Eretz Yisrael and the Gula Shlema, then surely they had other things to do. So why were they so busy with the gold and silver? To the point that Moshe had to push them away from the Yam Suf. Ayasa Moshe Yisrael the Yam Suf. So the Rebbe explains it in a fascinating way. And this is very simple. It says, before the Jewish people left Egypt, they were instructed by Moshe Rabbeinu in the name of Hashem that they should borrow gold and silver from their neighbors and take it out with them from Mitzrayim. And the words were, "V'nitzaltem es Mitzrayim." You should empty out Egypt. You should empty out Egypt of all its wealth. Because Hashem promised Avraham Avinu that the Jewish people will be enslaved in a foreign land and they'll be persecuted. And then they will be liberated. And then they'll go out with great wealth. So in order to fulfill the promise of them going out with the great wealth, they were told to borrow gold and silver from their neighbors, so they should go out with great wealth. But the lashon was v'nitzaltem es Mitzrayim. You should empty out Egypt. And Chazal say, what does v'nitzaltem mean? You should make it kimitzuda she'ein badagon u'kimitzula she'ein badagim. Make it like a trap, a bird's trap, without any bait, without any grain in it. Right? You want to catch birds, you make a trap, you put grain in it, and the birds are attracted to the grain, and they get caught in the trap. But once there's no more grain in the trap is worthless. So you should make Mitzrayim like a mitzuda, like a trap, bird trap without any grain. And like the depths of the sea without any fish. So empty out everything that there is in Mitzrayim, you have to empty out. Now the Jewish people thought they did their best. They collected, before they left Mitzrayim, they collected as much gold and silver as they could get their hands on. And with this, they left Mitzrayim. Now, when it came to the Yam Suf, and Paro brought his armies with their chariots and with their horses to the Yam Suf to pursue the Yidden, and the miracle happened that the Jewish people crossed the Yam Suf in dry land, and the Egyptians were trapped in the Yam Suf and they were drowned there, and all the wealth of Egypt was washed onto the shore. So suddenly the Yidden recognized that they hadn't fulfilled the mitzvah properly, because all this wealth is still there. There's so much more gold and silver and jewels that the Egyptians had with them that they hadn't fulfilled the mitzvah v'nitzaltem es Mitzrayim. Now the mitzvah v'nitzaltem es Mitzrayim, to empty out Egypt of all their wealth, was a commandment that they received from Hashem in Mitzrayim, and if they hadn't fulfilled it, they needed to chaparayim. So they stood there by the shores of the Yam Suf, trying to finish the job by collecting all the gold and silver that was available to them. And Moshe Rabbeinu came and told them, it's time to move on. You have to go to Matan Torah. So Yidden were a little bit puzzled because they knew the halacha. The halacha is that a mitzvah iveres, a mitzvah that's its opportunity is ending, its opportunity is passing. You have an opportunity to do the mitzvah. Tomorrow you won't have this opportunity. So that's a very, very special obligation, and it's even doichet Talmud Torah. It pushes aside the mitzvah of studying Torah. So true, we have to go to Har Sinai to receive the Torah, but first we have to complete the mitzvah iveres of the Nitzal Mitzrayim. And therefore, the Lashon Chazal is Hisiyon Bal Karcham. He made them move on against their will. What does against their will mean? Obviously, if Moshe Rabbeinu tells the Yidden that we have to move on, of course the Yidden are going to obey Moshe Rabbeinu. They're going to move on. But they did it Bal Karcham. They did it against their better judgment. Because if you ask them what they think that the mitzvah Iveris, the passing mitzvah of Yitzal Temas Mitzrayim, has to be completed first. So they said to Moshe Rabbeinu, if you tell us we have to go, we'll go. But it doesn't sound right to us. In our minds, what we should really be doing now is emptying out Mitzrayim, collecting all the gold and silver, because that's the mitzvah from Hashem. True, going to Matan Torah is very important, and Hashem did tell us, Hashem said to Moshe, when you take this nation out of Egypt, you will serve God by this mountain. True, we know we have to go to Matan Torah at some point and receive the Torah, but that wasn't a commandment, and definitely didn't have a time limit to it. While this commandment of Nitzal Temas Mitzrayim was clearly a commandment from Hashem, and its time limit was as long as there's still access to the wealth of Egypt. They leave the wealth of Egypt behind and they go towards Har Sinai, they're not going to be able to get back to get that wealth. Now, to understand the significance of that wealth and why it's so important, we can also understand this by we know that there's a prohibition in the Torah, everybody's familiar with, of Bal Tashkis. You're not allowed to waste something useful, right? If you have something useful, you're not allowed to just throw it in the bin and waste it. You use it for its use.
Maybe let's just show Mark and we're considered rights.
So again, what's the
in relation to the time limit?
Yeah.
Maybe it's Mrs. Shazman.
It's a reality right now. If as long as they're by the Yam Suf, they can get the gold and silver, right? Yeah. Once they leave the Yam Suf, they won't have access to it anymore.
But maybe like they're considered like the male and female.
I understand.
No, I'm making rubbish.
The same, no, I'm saying it's rubbish. I hear what you're saying. I know. Anyway, so why is there this mitzvah in Allah to ruin anything that is useful? Because we know that in every single physical object there are sparks of holiness. There are sparks of holiness, sparks of godliness, and when we take a physical object and we use it for the sake of the service of Hashem, we're redeeming and liberating those sparks and elevating them to the highest level. In fact, this is the whole purpose of our existence in this physical world. Take every single detail, every single aspect of this physical world and make it a dwelling place for Hashem. Use it for Hashem. So if Hashem has given us something physical to use for His service and we waste it away, it's a terrible crime. And that's why it was so important for the Jewish people to gather the gold and silver of Egypt, because part of the purpose of their being in Egypt was to take out all the sparks of Kedusha with them when they leave Egypt. In fact, it says, the second pasuk in the Torah, so according to Kabbalah, Tohu is the world that preceded our world, the world of chaos. And from the breaking of the vessels of the world of Tohu, lots of shards or sparks came down into our world. And everything, all physical things in this world have these sparks in the world of Tohu, which when we use it for the purpose of service of Hashem, we redeem it and elevate it and make it and return it back to its correct place. And so the pasuk says, "Beruach Elokim mirachefes al pnei hamayim." The word mirachefes is rapach mes. And from the breaking of the vessels of the world of Tohu, rapach is 288. 288 sparks that came down into this world, into all the physical things of this world. From those 288 sparks, it says, "Ve'erev rav Allah itam." When Yidden left Mitzrayim, they took a mixture, erev of rav, reish beis, 202 of those sparks came up with them from Mitzrayim. In other words, the vast majority of the sparks that came from the breaking of the vessels of the world of Tohu were in Mitzrayim. This is perhaps why it was organized that Yosef should be there at the beginning of the time of the Jewish people in Mitzrayim and gather together all the wealth of Egypt and all the neighboring countries into the kafors of Pare, so that when Yidden leave Mitzrayim, they'll take with them all those sparks. So Erev Rav Allah Itam is 202 out of the 288 sparks were in Mitzrayim. So it was imperative for the Yidden not just to leave Mitzrayim and be liberated from their slavery, but they had to take with them everything that was present in the wealth of Egypt. All those sparks had to come with them. So when the Yidden saw that at the banks of the shores of the Yam Suf there's still so much more gold and silver, they were concerned that maybe they haven't finished the job. There's still so many more sparks of Kedusha that they have to take with them. And therefore, they wanted to stay and take it. And Moshe Rabbeinu said, okay, that's it. We're going now to Har Sinai. So the Yidden understood that mitzvah is over. And it's interesting, like you mentioned about mitzvah Shazman Grama. So on Pesach, that if you eat matzah on Pesach, it's mechel dem himnusa. It's food of faith. You eat the matzah, it strengthens your faith. What happens if you take a matzah a week after Pesach and you eat it? It doesn't have that power anymore. Because it only has that power during the time in which that power is given to it. So when Moshe Rabbeinu says that no longer now the obligation to clean up Mitzrayim, now we have to move towards Har Sinai. So Moshe Rabbeinu reveals to us that mitzvah is now completed and it's not effective anymore. So there's no point in spending your time collecting gold and silver of Mitzrayim. It's not necessary anymore. But as long as the Jewish people were standing over there and collecting, and they were under the impression that the mitzvah is continuing, so they wanted to stay. And only when Moshe Rabbeinu told them that they must leave, did they leave Bal Karchan, against their will. Now the Mishnah says, Bal Karchach atachai. Against your will, you live. Now, when you do something against your will, you don't do it with a lot of enthusiasm. You do it. You have to do it. Nothing. What can you do? You have no choice. But you don't have excitement in it. You don't have enthusiasm in it. So, what does it mean when it says Bal Karchach atachai? Bal Karchach means against your will, and atachai means to do it with a chayis, to do it with a levedika. It seems to be a contradiction. So the answer is very simple. When you're involved in a certain matter of the service of Hashem, like the Jewish people were then involved in the avodah of emptying out all the gold and silver of Mitzrayim, taking all those sparks with them, you're obviously involved in it with a passion. As the Torah says, you should do it with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. When suddenly you're informed that, okay, this is no longer what you should be doing, you need to be doing something else. So it's hard to tear yourself away from it because you're not just going through the motions of doing that mitzvah. You're invested in it. You're excited about it. You're enthusiastic about it. And when you suddenly stop in your tracks, it's a difficult one because you have to get yourself out of that mode of being so involved in what you're doing. Nevertheless, if this is what Hashem wants from you, so you say, okay, so I'm going to try and throw myself in to the next project with all my heart and soul. So even though it's Bal Karchach, because it's difficult to tear yourself away from the first Avodah, but now it's atachai. Now you have a chayis in the new Avodah because this is now what what Hashem wants from you. So the Jewish people were involved in one Avodah, the Avodah of emptying out the gold and silver of Mitzrayim. And suddenly Moshe Rabbeinu tells them, okay, time's up. Time to go to Har Sinai, to Mount Torah. So they had to tear themselves away, Bal Karchan, from the Avodah of Nitzalta Mitzrayim and start excitedly investing themselves in the Avodah of moving towards Mount Torah. So it was Bal Karchach atachai, which has a very powerful lesson for all of us. Whenever we're engaged in a certain matter of Avodas Hashem, we're meant to be involved, not just going through the motions, but meant to be involved with a passion and with an excitement and enthusiasm, to the point that if somebody should come along and tell us, okay, time's up, we're not doing that anymore, we got to do something else. So it's difficult to tear yourself away from it because you're not just going through the motions, you're really invested in it. But at the same time, if this is what you know that you're now being required to do something else, so you tear yourself away from the first Avodah, then you invest yourself in a new Avodah. For example, let's say someone's davening Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, with a lot of kavanah, and suddenly it's brought to their attention that someone needs assistance. There's a young mother that has a few children, and that's a bit of overwhelming, and they need assistance. And it's in a situation where you know that you have to stop doing what you're doing and go start doing something else. Go look after Yiddish Kindle. So if you're just going through the motions of saying the words of davening without any passion, so it's an easy thing. Yeah, you close the thing and you go to the next thing. But if you're invested in it and you're doing it with an excitement and a passion, it's difficult to tear yourself away from. On the other hand, if you know this is what's required of you, you do it. It's difficult. It's against your will, but you do it. And when you do it in such a manner that you invest yourself in what's now being required. So your chayis is now in the new thing. So it's Bal Karchav, but it's Atachai. So there's a tremendous lesson here, how whatever is required of us, Moshe Rabbeinu tells us this is what you should be doing. On one hand, it's difficult to tear yourself away from what you were doing before, and it's supposed to be difficult. Because if it's not difficult, that means you weren't really there. And at the same time, you're supposed to be ready to do it, to get involved in the next calling with enthusiasm. That's one lesson to be learned from this. Another lesson that we can learn from this is true about the sparks of Kedusha that there were in physical objects. And we said that even though each Jew had 90 donkeys laden with gold and silver of Egypt, which were filled with sparks of Kedusha, they didn't say, we have enough sparks of Kedusha. We don't need more. We don't have to bother ourselves to bend down over the Yamsuf and pick up gold and silver. We have enough. No, they said as long as there are sparks of Kedusha that haven't been liberated yet, we can never be satisfied because we haven't finished our responsibility. There are still sparks of Kedusha left over. How much more so when we're talking about the sparks of Kedusha that there are in Yiddish and Neshamas. So if we see Yidden who are unfortunately estranged to Yiddishkeit, they don't really understand and appreciate what it's all about, and their Neshama is crying out for help. So how much more so that we need to reach out to every single Yid that we can reach out to and liberate them from their ignorance and from their situation that they find themselves in, and help the Neshama find its way to connect to the Eibusher. And to say, if somebody will say, well, I was busy with Kiruv for many years, and I did a lot of good work, and I was part of a lot of Yidden. Now it's time for me to retire. Let somebody else do it. So we learn from this story that no, it doesn't work like that. You don't measure by how much you've achieved. You measure by how many sparks there are out there that have not yet been redeemed. As long as there's sparks out there that have not been redeemed, you can't sit on your laurels. You can't rest because there's still another Yid that needs to be reached. It needs to be liberated. We're going to move on to Tanya. So we're starting a new paragraph of the Hagdama. So it's page Dalet, and in the numbers on the bottom of the page, it's in the Roman numerals. If you have the same Tanya that I do, it's 21 XXI. The new paragraph towards the top of the page. Ach b'yodei makirei kami. If you remember, at the conclusion of the last year, we were talking about the fact that how the importance of personalizing the Yiddishkeit for each individual according to their Sheirosh HaNeshama and according to their mindset, according to the way their mind works, according to the way their heart works. And the Alter Rebbe brought it out with a Kal V'Chomer. Generally, we know that in Yiddishkeit we have the practical side of Yiddishkeit, and we have the deeper part. How you're supposed to relate emotionally, intellectually. So obviously, everybody would agree that in the practical side of Yiddishkeit, there's more unanimity, there's more one size fits all than there is in the deeper, more inner part of Yiddishkeit, how you relate to Hashem emotionally and intellectually. Surely there's more room for diversity. As I gave an example, I think in the last year, if you have a room of 20 women are lighting Shabbos candles. So going through the act of lighting Shabbos candles, everybody's doing pretty much the same thing. But the kavanah that they have at that time, what's going through their mind and their heart as they're lighting the Shabbos candles, is going to be very diverse from one person to another. Everybody's going to do it their own way, according to their Sheirosh HaNeshama, according to the feelings that they have in their heart, according to the thoughts they have in their mind. It's all going to influence the uniqueness of the way they're going about the mitzvah. So there's the practical side of things, and there's the deeper emotional and intellectual side of things. So says the Alter Rebbe, if I can prove to you that even in the practical side of things, there's a vast difference between what's required of one Jew and what's required of another. Because we know that there's machlokes from one extreme to another between various opinions. And what's the correct thing? Everybody's correct. All the words of the living God. So if you have a machlekes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, or you have a machlekes the Beis Yosef and the Ramah, so what is the correct thing to do? Until the halacha was paskin for Beis Shammai, for the students of Beis Shammai, the followers of Beis Shammai, the correct thing to do was to go according to Beis Shammai, and the followers of Beis Hillel, the correct thing for them was to go according to Beis Hillel. So even in the practical element of Yiddishkeit, there's room for saying that neshamas that are from this dimension should do it this way, and neshamas from this dimension should do it this way. So it is different for every person. And the same thing today we have the machlekes of the Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Yosef Karo, and the Ramah, Ramesha Isulish, and Svardim Pascal like the Beis Yosef, and Ashkenazim Pascal like the Ramah in most cases. So what's the correct thing? For Svardim, this is the right thing, and for Ashkenazim, this is the right thing. They're both right. So we see that even in practical side of Yiddishkeit, there's room for diversity. There's room for saying this is the right one for this is the right way for this person, this is the right way for this person. So how much more so when it comes to the esoteric part of Yiddishkeit, when it comes to how we should connect to Hashem, to our love and fear and understanding of Hashem's greatness, etc., etc. There's no question about it that there is no one size fits all. Everybody has to connect in accordance with their uniqueness. And that is the unique role of a Rebbe. And a Rebbe guides each individual in accordance with the root of their neshama and their specific mindset, how they should uniquely connect with Hashem in accordance with their capacity, in accordance with their potential. So how would you ever consider that a sefer can replace such a phenomenon? That's the question that we were left with. And now in the new paragraph, the Alter Rebbe is going to address this. And he says, I am speaking here to a very select group of individuals who I know personally. I know them. I'm familiar with them. Each and every one of the members of the members of our brotherhood, of our countries, and nearby countries. There was discussion with affection between us. I'm talking here about people who are revealed before me, everything hidden in their hearts and minds, in the service of Hashem that's dependent on the heart. So I'm talking here about people that I've met and I've discussed with them, and I know exactly where they're up to. So Aleim titef milasi, it's to them that my words are dripping, and my tongue ate safer through the pen of the scribe. The Kundreishim Elu, and these pamphlets, and the Kram B'Shem L'Kutei Amarim, that are called the compilation of sayings, that are gathered from books and scribes of great holiness, supernal holiness, the Shmasam Eden, may their souls rest in Gan Eden. We explained already when we learned the Sharblat that Svarim is a reference to specifically the Rambam, the Shalom, and the Maral Miprag, who the Alter Rebbe didn't know personally. They were before his times, but they wrote books that he studied and was very inspired by. Pisayfrim is a reference to the Baal Shem Tov and the Magid, whose teachings the Alter Rebbe studied directly from the Magid, and from the Magid also the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov. For some who are well known to us. So before we go any further, let's try to clarify what's going on over here. So what's the Alter Rebbe saying? He's saying, I'm not just writing this for anybody. I'm writing this for a unique group of people who I'm personally familiar with. I know them very well. And I'm thinking about each one individually, his sheresh haneshama, his mindset, his level of interaction on an emotional level with godliness. And I'm writing guidance for specific individuals. So I'm tailoring what I'm writing to the needs of the specific individuals. And therefore, I can be doing this the same way that if I meet with one individual, I will be guiding him in accordance with his specific unique potential and his specific unique neshama and his specific unique mindset and his specific unique emotional capacity. So in this sefer, I'm going to be addressing exactly in the same way. I'm going to be speaking in a very personal and individualistic way to each individual who's going to be reading the sefer. So at first glance, if we take it superficially, it seems to be saying that the Alter Rebbe wrote the Tanya for a select group of people, for people that he personally knew, he personally met with them, he knew what was on their minds and their hearts, and for them he wrote the Tanya, which makes you ask right away, if that's the case, why in Chabad do we make such a big deal of propagating the Tanya, spreading the Tanya? Right? We organize Shiurim and Tanya, and we try to bring as many people into it as possible, and we talk about the incredible benefits that there are from studying Tanya. When you read the Alter Rebbe's own introduction, it seems to be implying that it's written for a very specific group of people, and it won't necessarily have a benefit for other people. So this question can be addressed at two levels, at a very superficial level and at a deeper level. On a very superficial level, the Tanya, you could say, has two functions. One function that the Tanya has is that it's an incredible inspirational piece of work that guides Yidden in the service of Hashem and inspires Yidden in the service of Hashem. As was said we read in the Haskama of the sons of the Alter Rebbe, Kol Dvarav Kegachle Eish Bayaris, all the words of the Alter Rebbe in Tanya and in other Svarim are like coals of fire, burning coals of fire. Yalhivu halavavis makarva lavim shmashamayim, that can inflame the hearts to draw them near to Hashem. So whoever you are, when you study Tanya, it's like an adrenaline. It fires you up with passion to connect to Hashem. Great thing. On top of that, we also learned that Tanya is Oisius Eson, which is the essence of the neshama, the strong, insistent aspect in your neshama that a Yid under no circumstances wants to sever himself from Hashem. Every Yid wants to be fully connected to Hashem. And Tanya has the power to arouse that within every single Jew. So it's a fantastic sefer because it gives you a tremendous amount of enthusiasm and passion and guidance and direction in the service of Hashem. Then there's another question. The other question is, does it have the unique capacity to replace Yechidus? Yechidus is when a chassid is standing one-on-one with the Rebbe, and the Rebbe is guiding him his individual avodah. So does Tanya have the ability to do that or not? So if you read the Alter Rebbe's words very superficially, it seems that yes, it does that for the select group of people that it was written for. And for everybody else, it's still inspirational and it still inspires you up in Avodas Hashem, and it still brings you close to Hashem and reveals the depth of your neshama, does all those wonderful things. Does it replace Yechidus? That's up for discussion. That's on a superficial level. So it's worth learning Tanya and propagating the teachings of Tanya for the tremendous benefits that the teachings of Tanya have, that they arouse your neshama to have a strong connection with Hashem. Whether or not it replaces Yechidus. But then there is a deeper dimension to this. And that is when there's a tradition by Chassidim. And when the Alter Rebbe said, Ach b'yoydei makirei ka'amina, that I'm referring here to the people that I personally know and I personally met, and I know exactly what's going on in their minds and hearts. And to them I'm writing, who is the Alter Rebbe referring to? So there's a tradition by Chassidim that the Alter Rebbe was referring to anyone who will ever open up a Tanya and study from. Anyone throughout the generations who will ever open up a Tanya and study from it, the Alter Rebbe was aware of that person at the time that he wrote the Tanya. He thought about him. And he addressed the Tanya specifically to that individual with his unique connection, his unique Shevish HaNeshama, and his unique mindset, and his unique emotional capacity. And all that was the Alter Rebbe had that in mind when he wrote the Tanya. So not only is the Tanya an incredible piece of work that will inspire you and inflame your heart to become passionately connected to Hashem, but it actually is a personalized guide that was written with you in mind as an individual. And the Alter Rebbe, thinking about you and knowing exactly what's going on in you, is advising you and guiding you and directing you how you can develop your personal connection to Hashem in the most amazing way. So, saying that reminds me of Tehillim, which David HaMelech wrote, also having in mind, and speaking to the individual. Very nice. I was once learning Tanya with a gentleman, and at one point he said to me, I want to tell you why I'm so interested in Tanya. He said that he was as a young bacher, he was learning in Torah V'das, and I was once on a Meitzai Achron Shal Pesach. And a group of Bachrim came from Torah V'das to 770 to receive Keshal Bracha from the Rebbe. The Rebbe would fabring at the end of every Yom Tov. At the end of the fabring, there was benching, and there was Maidiv and Abdallah. Abdallah was on the cusp of benching. You don't drink before Abdallah. And then after Abdallah, the Rebbe would distribute from the Keshal Bracha, from the cup that was used for the blessings of Birchas Hamazon, and distribute that to all the people present. And many people would come also from other areas to queue up and receive Keshal Bracha. So he came with a group of Bachrim. This is going back probably to the 1950s. He came with a group of Bachrim to receive and receive Keshal Bracha from the Rebbe. And he says that as he walked over to the Rebbe said to him, "Is old Zen learning Tanya? You should see to it to study Tanya." And it's always been on his mind that the Rebbe told him specifically, "Is old Zen learning Tanya," and he never dealt with it. And when he found out there's an opportunity to learn Tanya, he was very interested in fulfilling that instruction that he had from the Rebbe, "Is old Zen learning Tanya," and therefore he took advantage of it and jumped into it and got involved in this regular Tanya study. So I said to him when we learned this, I said, perhaps that the Rebbe was saying to you is that the Alter Rebbe, when he wrote the Tanya, he had you in mind. So what a shame it would be that you should miss out on this incredible privilege that you have, that the Alter Rebbe had you in mind when he wrote the Tanya, he wrote it specifically for you, and you're not taking advantage of it. So we have the privilege of attending a Shiur in Tanya, or learning Tanya in any format that you're learning it. You should know that besides the fact that it's inspiring and it's uplifting and it connects us, it also is, the Alter Rebbe thought about us as individuals and is guiding us through the Tanya, how we should develop our personal and individual connection with the Eibush. Of course.
What is the translation on the right and what on the left saying you find names of the
Okay, the question was why the translation in this Tanya is on the right rather than on the left, and the answer is I don't know. I think, is it each page according to which side it is in the Tanya? No. Okay. No, I don't know the answer. Then he continues. So this is taken from the works of Svarim and Seifrim, as I explained before. Some of the ideas that you're going to find in Tanya stem from correspondence with our rabbis from the Holy Land. Now, just to explain, after the passing of the Maggid of Mezrich, some of his disciples, the opposition and the persecution that was coming from the opponents of Chassidus was very overwhelming. And some of the disciples of the Maggid decided that they're just going to move to Eretz Yisrael, and in the quiet of life in Eretz Yisrael, away from all the tumult, they're going to immerse themselves in serving Hashem in accordance with the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid. And they're not going to bother with having to put up with all the opposition that there is. And amongst the people who took this approach was Reb Mendel of Vitebsk, who was one of the oldest Talmidim of the Maggid, Reb Avram of Kalisk, and the Alter Rebbe considered himself, after the passing of the Maggid, the Alter Rebbe considered himself a follower of Reb Mendel of Vitebsk. And to the extent that he even considered, he thought it would be maybe a good idea to join them and also travel to Eretz Yisrael. Not only he thought that maybe it would be a good idea, but he actually started on the journey. And he got until a certain city called Ma'alev Podolsk. And when he reached Ma'alev Podolsk, he reconsidered. And he thought to himself that what would the Maggid of Mezrich, his Rebbe, have wanted from him? And he reached the conclusion that what his Rebbe, the Maggid of Mezrich, would have wanted from him was that he should stay in Europe and spread the teachings of Chassidus in White Russia and in Lithuania, in these places where he was given the responsibility of disseminating teachings of Chassidus. So after 6 months in Ma'alev Podolsk, the Alter Rebbe turned around and went back to White Russia and continued disseminating Chassidus and put himself at great risk as a result of this. This led to his eventual imprisonment and everything, but this is all because he knew that the wellsprings of the Baal Shem Tov should be spread forth was vital, was very important. So, but the Alter Rebbe corresponded with these tzaddikim who moved to Eretz Yisrael, and the Alter Rebbe actually undertook also to look after the financial needs of the community in Eretz Yisrael, which is why he set up what we know as Koil Chabad. Koil Chabad, Tzidkas Rameir Balanes, was set up by the Alter Rebbe to collect funds to send to the community in Eretz Yisrael so that they could continue to serve Hashem in accordance with the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid in Eretz Yisrael. And when the Alter Rebbe was imprisoned, one of the main slanders against him was the fact that there was a suspicion that he was sending funds to the Sultan of Turkey, because Eretz Yisrael was then under the rulership of the Sultan of Turkey, who was not a very good relationship with the Tsar of Russia. And so they figured that if they tell the Tsar that this rabbi is colluding with the Sultan of Turkey, that will surely get him to imprison the Alter Rebbe and take serious action against him. So he mentions over here that that generally the thoughts here in Tanya are based on the Rambam, the Shalah, the Maral Mikrag, teachings of the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid, but some of them are also taken from correspondence with our rabbis in Eretz Yisrael. May it be speedily rebuilt, speedily in our days. Some of these ideas I heard directly from them while they were still here in Europe with us. Primarily, everything here is answers to many questions, which members of our community of these countries are continuously asking, each individual according to his level, to provide counsel in the service of Hashem. So, since I no longer have the time to sit with each individual and answer his question individually, there's also another problem, that even if I would find the time to sit with every individual and answer his question individually, often it happens that after I spend time with somebody and give him guidance, sometime later he's forgotten what I told him and he needs to hear it again. So Al-Kain, therefore, Rashamti kol atshuvas al kol hasheilos, I decided to write down all the answers to all the questions. L'mishmeres la'os, as a guard, as a guarding, as a sign, l'yislachal echad ve'echad l'zikarim beineinav, should be for every individual a remembrance between his eyes, meaning an easily available, something you can easily make reference to and find the advice as it's written. Will no longer have to squeeze himself, to push, to come and speak to me privately. Because in what I'm writing in these pamphlets of Tanya, he will find a calming solution for his soul, and a proper advice for anything that he's finding challenging in the service of Hashem. And his heart should be fixed in trust in Hashem, who looks after us, that Hashem will guide him to be able to find in these writings the solution and the inspiration and the guidance and that he needs in his specific case. Now, at the beginning of the previous chapter, the previous paragraph, the Alter Rebbe made 2 points. One point was, does the book that one is reading, that's giving him inspiration in the service of Hashem, does that book have what you need? And we talked about the fact that if the book is written based on intellectual position of the writer, then surely it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all, because no two people think the same. If the book is written based on statements of our sages, then yes, it will have the right thing that you're looking for, but it's only going to be appropriate in a general sense. It won't necessarily apply to your specific connection to Hashem. And while Yechidus is focused on your specific connection to Hashem, so here the Alter Rebbe has explained how in this Sefer it's all covered. However, there was another point that the Alter Rebbe mentioned in the previous chapter, and that is that even if everything is cut, even if the book has exactly what you need to read, it's very possible that when you read it in a book, you'll misunderstand what it says, because we tend to read things and understand them in accordance with our previous assumptions and our previous understanding of things. And if a person is in a state of confusion in the spiritual journey, then when he's going to read the book, he's going to read it in a way he's going to get it in a confused way. So even if we say that the Alter Rebbe has a special gift and he's able to write a sefer that's going to say exactly what everybody needs to hear, But who says that they'll be able to work out from that sefer what it means to them? Maybe they won't be clear enough in their own ability to take it out from the sefer. So for this, the Alter Rebbe adds, and he says, if someone is too limited in his mind to be able to work out the counsel from these pamphlets, then he's going to read what it says over here, and he's not going to understand how he can apply it to his situation. So so he'll have to discuss it with the elder chassidim in his city, and they will give him to understand how in the Tanya there are the answers to his questions. The problem is the Alter Rebbe knew his customers, and he knew, he envisaged how this is going to work. A younger chassid is going to come to the older chassid. They're going to say, I have a problem such and such. The Rebbe said that the solution lies in the Tanya. I learned the Tanya. I don't see the solution. Maybe you can help me. So what's the likelihood that the older chassid is going to say to him? He's going to say, you're asking me? Who am I? What do I know? I can't help you. So you're going to be stuck again. So the Alter Rebbe continues and he says, V'aleim bakashasi, to these elder chassidim and wiser men, my request is, shleilosum yad lepeh, don't put your finger by your mouth. L'isnaig ba'nova v'shifl shel sheker, and to conduct yourself with humility in an inappropriate manner, in a false humility, chas v'shalom. We know the terrible punishment which there is for withholding food in a time of hunger. If you're in a time of hunger and you have food to distribute, to sell, to give, and you refuse to give it, you're waiting for the price to go up, that's a terrible thing. So if that's true in a physical hunger, how much more so in a spiritual hunger? It's a time of spiritual hunger. The people are hungry for spiritual guidance, and you're able to help them, then you have an obligation to provide what you're able to do. So if you have the wisdom to be able to help people decipher how in the Tanya the solution to their problem lies, and the guidance that they're requiring lies, you have an obligation to make yourself available to those that are less able than you are to guide them. The question was, what happens if you guide them and they decide it's not what they want? So the first thing is, if a person is looking for the truth, we have to know that what we're looking for is the truth, not what works for me, not what's pleasant for me. If you're looking for what's pleasant for you, you're never going to find the truth, right? So, but here we're talking about serious people that are actually looking for the truth, but they're too limited to be able to find it in the Tanya. So he says there are chassidim who are more knowledgeable than you. Go and talk it through with them, and they will guide you how, if they understand where you're coming from, what your issue is, and they know they learned the Tanya, and they'll be able to work out what was written by the Alter Rebbe into the Tanya for this specific situation or for this specific case. The Geidel Haschar, and on the other hand, the great reward that is available for those that do make themselves available to inspire others. As our sages say on the pasuk, which says Hashem will illuminate both their eyes. It says that when a rich man and a poor man meet, Hashem illuminates both their eyes. The poor man benefits from the fact that the rich man helps him, and the rich man benefits from the fact that he's had the privilege of helping another Jew. That's true in the physical and material sense, and it's also true in the spiritual sense. If a person is spiritually wealthy and encounters another person who is spiritually poor, so when he guides him and inspires him, it is a great benefit to both of them. The person who is spiritually poor will gain from the guidance of the one who is more wealthy spiritually, and the one who's more wealthy spiritually will gain because the Alter Rebbe brings, the Chazal say that the fact that you teach another person and guide another person is nasim moichai v'liboi zakim elef pa'amim kacha. One's mind and one's heart become 1,000 times more refined and more sensitive in the merit of the fact that you helped another Jew. So the Geidel Aschar, the incredible reward from the statement that our sages make on the pasuk, Meir English name Hashem, Yoir Hashem panav aleim, Hashem will shine His countenance upon them. Er pnei melech chayim, the light of the king's countenance is life. Mechayeh chayim is akenu, may Hashem, the provider of life, give us the merit, v'chayenu, and give us the life to live l'yamim asher l'yumadu eid ishis rayehu, to the days when people will no longer need to teach one another a gamer. Hikulam yedu eisi v'gamer. The pasuk says the time is coming when people will no longer have to teach one another because everyone will know me. Why will everyone know me? Because the world will be filled with the knowledge of Hashem. Amen. When Mashiach comes, the world will be filled with the knowledge of Hashem, and then it will no longer be necessary for one person to teach another. But until then, it is necessary for people to teach one another. And even though the Alter Rebbe has written a sefer that includes all the answers to all the questions that anybody's going to have, they can read the sefer and the answers will be here. But if they're not capable of finding the answers, they need what we call a Seilach Harav. Make yourself a guide, make yourself a teacher, and ask the teacher, based on the teachings of Chassidus, based on the teachings of the Tanya, to guide you and that way you'll be able to fully develop your individual potential and your individual role in serving Hashem in accordance with your specific shayrish neshama, your specific mindset, your specific emotional capacity. That's the answer that's tailored for you as an individual is right here in the Sefer. You might need help identifying it, but it's definitely there. Any questions?
Won't be any conversions learning from both, learning together, or?
It's a very good question. The question was, we just said that when Mashiach comes, since he'll be Molo Aretz Deis Hashem, so lo yilmudu eit dishis reyehu, ikulam yedu oisi. So the pasuk ikulam yedu oisi continues limiktanom v'yad g'dolam, from the smallest to the greatest, which is sometimes implied that even then they'll be greater and smaller, in the sense of, because what we've learned before gives us the ability to have a better appreciation of what we're learning now. If somebody's listening to a conversation across the wall, and they pick up little tidbits here and there, right? And they're not really clear on what's going on. And later they hear the whole story. So they say, now I get it. Now I know. This came in and this came in, right? So the whole different appreciation for it. So it says the way we'll understand Torah, when the Malach Haaretz Deis Hashem, those that studied before will have they'll say, now I know what Atzilus is, what Bri is, what Yitzira is, what Asiya is, what Nefesh Elokis is, how it works. It's all making sense now. Somebody's learning it for the first time. It's new to them. So even though everybody will get the revelation, but they'll appreciate it on a different level. So there will be K'tanam Ad G'dolim then as well. So I guess to have those benefits, there will be a benefit in learning from. It says the Mashiach will teach the Torah even to the others to Moshe. We won't be in an essential state. We won't be in a state of ignorance because it'll all be available.
So the new Torah is going to be our Torah with new dimension or completely?
I believe the question is if the Torah Chadash of Mashiach is going to be our Torah with a new dimension or a completely new Torah. So I believe the Torah Zulei Tia Mechlefes. The Torah is not going to change. The only thing is that the scope that we'll be able to realize that what the Torah is telling us is something so much richer than we ever dreamt. That will be a completely new scope. Just like when you learn the same Inyan in Torah, but you learn it off Chassidus, you have a whole different picture of it, right? So I believe that's the direction to take.
Let's ask,
Of course.
you may want to answer that. This book you said you was learning for that.
I didn't mention it because I didn't know if you'd be comfortable with it.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Let's start off with the record.